I think this conference has proven that wonderful expression about experts. Experts like us know more and more about less and less. That's the nature of the game. 10 years ago, Bob Goodwin, whom some of you remember, Bob and I went to Washington County to document tide mills that we had heard about. And there was a tide mill we'd heard about, and it blew my mind when I got there. Very seriously, it was an experience that was one of the most exciting that I've ever had with tide mills. It was a tide mill, according to the story that the family told. A 15-year-old Scottish lad came to Eastport before it was in Maine, met some Passamaquoddy and told them he wanted to get some land where he could build a tide mill. When he told them what a tide mill needed for property, they took him to what's now called Gravelly Point into where Bob lives now. He built a tide mill. He and then his descendants continued to do grind grain and saw lumber for many generations. The tide mill stopped operating and they built a freshwater mill up at the head of the pond. One of the group recently, 10 years ago, started an organic farm. That farm is now operated by the 7th, 8th, and 9th generation of the family. Their roots are there. Bob lives right beside what you're going to see in a moment. The Bells Tide Mill, that's plural. The Bells own the tide mill. It's in Edmunds Township. I bet you don't know where it is, but that's okay. Here's what it looks like. Where would you have the tide mill, folks? Probably right in here. It must be mid-tide or high tide. We can see either a shadow or seaweed here. This is the place. Get ready, get your boots on. Here we go. Bang. I hope this interests you, because this is Bob and somebody who were looking for something. I'll tell you about it in a minute. The mill is covered with seaweed. The mill remains. A lot of seaweed. Here is a ledge that it's a 23-foot rise and fall of tide. Wow. Okay. And the ledge is significant. Here's Bob and somebody up in, who is that? Up in the left. So this water is pretty much always running. It's making a lot of noise. As you can see, when the tide is going out, bingo, 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 there are 3 or 4 layers of something out there, and everything is covered with seaweed. And it goes in and out, okay? And here they are looking for something. We'll get down to it here. Here they are looking for something. I don't know why that keeps shifting. Ready? Bingo. Now, what we're going to do for this is the farmhouse. You want to go and look at this tide mill? It is an Airbnb. Go do it. I recommend it. This under the seaweed is where we tried to do an archaeological survey. And the Bells had lined up some of their relatives couple of their friends. We had a wonderful week earlier this summer. Can you see it? Members of the family, one friend of mine, the youngest person back on he's the ninth generation. Try to figure out what operated, how did it operate that made ground grain and corn became a sawmill also. Just looking down the guzzle. This is a black and white shot of the bay at mid-tide. Now we're gonna go to work.
Well then, why were they stopping water there?
This sound is there all the time.
Don't know. Yeah.
That beam goes all the way across. It's 30
The
feet
water wheel would have been an upgrade water wheel?
that way.
She did that. There's a vertical wheel from the bottom, at this point, the bottom of the wheel.
Talking about a horizontal
Hit by
wheel,
that water.
power.
Yeah.
Counterclockwise.
How does the water get in?
Very thin at the top, but they get about this thick down as you go down.
Vertical stream.
All the kids on the jump off the bridge into the water.
What sort of stuff is the line that inside many times
It's still here.
I know.
Or that's at least probably gets thicker as you go down there. It's at least, 2 or 3 inches thick here.
Look at how massive that beam is.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
The horizontal wheel would have been better because of the amount of ice. And I understand you get a lot of ice cakes in it.
Then you have to go on all this stuff. Talking about it. And then people went out into the area with tape measures. We began to record. I was up on the side of the hill telling people where to go and broke down the numbers. I wouldn't He fell in one that are just marking. That's Jerry Mountain. Aaron who runs the farm. What's her name?
Ruth. Ruth.
Ruth. now gonna look at the pond that was created by the dam. Got one great picture of cattle going back and forth across that pasture. What I want to do right now is to introduce Bob Bell, who is what, the eighth generation? Seventh generation. He's one of the old timers there. His granddaughter is the one we just saw. Yesterday, he and his whole family were up in northern Maine, hunting moose. I guess they didn't find any. He left at 3 o'clock yesterday morning to come down to a relative in Gardner where he spent the night. And he's here now, and he's just gonna tell us what it's like to have a tide mill in his backyard.
Well, it's quite spectacular.
You're gonna speak up a little bit.
It's really spectacular to be part of this group here today. And I really want to thank Mr. Bud Warren for kindling the excitement of past history at this location and the history that has been lost of the farm and the grist mill. And Robert Bell came here in 16 from Scotland, looking for, like Bud said, a place to make a grist mill. After living in Eastport for a few years, he migrated up to Edmunds Township, which was just king's land at the time, and got a grant and started this project of a grist mill. And from there, it grew to logging with timber coming off the land and sawing probably some of those oak logs. They must have hand hewn them, but to imagine how they've built that structure today with no hydraulics and no permits. We can't find the permit, but anyway, that's besides the point. It amazes me that the technology of leverage, fulcrums, cables, ropes, whatever they needed to achieve to get a project like that done. And after that, stopped producing grain and lumber. It moved up to, like Bud said, the rock dam at the head of the pond with a 3-leveled sawmill with long lumber on the bottom floor, box boards on the second floor, and cedar shingles on the third floor. And the 3 master schooners used to come in front of the farmhouse that Bud showed you. And they used to be loaded on that and go to Portland and Boston and ports south of Eastport by way of schooners and freight and the boats that they had at the time. But the history has always been trying to make a living. It's not looking at the history. It's not understanding how it all worked in the past. It's how do we survive to stay here for the future? And that's kind of the struggles that any farmer has, and especially something as carried on as long as it has. This generation, next generation, the generations after that, the other, they just can't fail. So it's exciting to be part of that. My dad was a big part of it. He went to the University of Orono. Went to extra engineering. He tried out for the Boston Red Sox. He got on the team coming up to before the season started. He got spiked in the groin. Then went to the Chesapeake, the Eastern Shore League, where he played. And after that, he went to work the extension in the winter months, Maryland Extension, where I met my mother. And she had her family had a greenhouse business, and being an ROTC, the war broke out. So after that, he had to enlist. And he wrote home to his mother and said, paratroopers is this new group in the army, they pay more money, so I'm joining them. And that was St. Mariglis on D-Day, and that little ball at the end of it, and also a bridge too far, so I'm even lucky to be here, really, so. But anyway, he came, lived in Maryland with a great house. My grandfather was up here struggling with the farm. My grandmother died, he was lonely, he lived alone, so. Dad said, guys, it's time to go home to Maine, I wanna go home, so he moved home, and here we are. And, we started the dairy farm at a higher capacity, and today there's, my brother's family has a creamery on the farm, and they make cheeses and yogurt and kefir. And then my son has, he has dairy cows and the organic chickens and some vegetables, pork and beef for some of the cows is sold for hamburger and other products for beef, but it's mostly the chickens, and the timber also is part of the thing. So any more I can talk about would be just living in a remote area of Washington County. It feels like we travel to Portland once a week, truck spends the night in Portland, selling the products here, and then moving back to Bangor and peddling chicken and milk and the products we produce on the farm on the travel throughout Bar Harbor, Blue Hill, Belfast, Rockland, and Portland. And then we do go up to Guilford, that area where most of the.
What's the dream for the Tide Mill?
The dream for the Tide Mill is understanding how to find out more about it. And it could possibly be the archaeologists coming in, seeing if those are oak logs, seeing what's there. I saw a gate at one time that I thought was a gate that of this big, this high. They must have opened it up to have the turbine rotate according to what Bud was telling us. And I saw it stuck up after the ice went out, and I said, well, it's been preserved this long, I guess it'll be preserved better than I can keep it. So I just let it flip over, and it's in the seaweed and the rockweed somewhere, but we haven't found it yet. And after a real heavy ice flow with that bay behind the bridge, there was a heavy ice flow, and the ice went down through there and ripped up a lot of the vegetation on the channel floor. And it was probably the year of 1964, and we had an old 420 240 John Deere bulldozer with a winch on it, and the stone just showed up like a ray of sun down there and on the floor. And Dad said, that's the grist stone, let's pull it out. So I was about 8, 9 years old then, 10 years old. We put cables on it and pulled it up over the bank, and I'm sure there's still another one down there. But the future for the history is very important. It seems like it's been neglected over the past bunch of years, because we know it's there, and was the extent of where we wanted to go with it at the time, it feels like. But I think now we're on a different plane with what Bud's taught us about the history that's there and the technology that was used. So it's going to probably, I can't speak for the whole family, but it would probably be researching that and just seeing how it was built, what type of leverage, what it was built with. And the mill up on the freshwater mill, the relative said that they took that mill in they moved the mill from 1860. I don't even know, the end of the 1870s, something like that, and they moved it up to the freshwater mill. And the freshwater mill is 3 dams on ponds, so they could open up the upper flush it, the lower flush it, the middle flush it, and saw wood. And that was more of a summer operation, because the ice in the winter, they'd bring the logs on the ice in the winter and then saw in the summer. why that change was. But a lot of that, the turbines up there and the wooden tooth wheels up there. And we have a wooden tooth, replaceable tooth that someone found in their attic in a shoebox, and it said Bell's Mill. And they showed up one day about 10 years ago and said, I think this goes to the mill someplace. So I said, what is that thing? So I tried looking at it, and then I was up around the old freshwater mill, and here was wooden piece of cog missing, and I fit that piece in there, and I said, that fits pretty good. So that's a tooth that was replaced with gears today. So it was, and that, a lot of that history is up there too. What was there for turbines, what was there for shafting, what was there for the old dam still sound. But it's this mill, this dam here that we're talking about today, where the grist mill was, and the tidal mill was certainly a work of challenges, I would think. Yeah.
You got questions, folks?
Out of curiosity, where did the bell come from in Scotland?
It came from
St.
St.
Andrews?
Andrews. Yeah, he was, I think, 14, 15. And he got the grain running good, and he sold some grain to the British Army, and he went to Boston locked up. So the family in Scotland sent someone over to get him out of jail and say he was sorry, and he came back and didn't sell any grain to the British anymore before the Revolutionary War. Rather how much of that was sold or what that was. There was also a crane that was tied in with the mill, a little bit of an investor, and that was Captain John Crane, and he was a Revolutionary War major hero out of the Whiting area. So maybe he's trying to get full content of the mill. I don't know. Am I getting rid of a partner? I don't know the whole story, but it's interesting to know that stuff. It's quite a lot of history there. Any more questions?
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. What I've got is some pictures just to show what went on. This is what Bob found out in the mud, in the rocks and the seaweed. He found a 2-foot square, maybe 2.5 foot wooden thing. It did not have the post in it. It had metal straps, and Bob said that they were designed as if to go this way. This matches perfectly the drawing by Sam Manning of the tide mill at the Morse Mill in Phippsburg. You can see over here is a hole in the dam with a penstock, and the water comes through here. Here is a gate that goes up and down with a hand lever. So that's what Bob has invented for us, or has lost, or whatever. I call it Bob's imaginary dog.
We believe you. He's making me question myself.
Okay, here's Bob throwing seaweed. Next, this is what I saw in 2011. Next, this is what I saw in 2011. You can see the extent to which all that stuff is covered up by seaweed. Now, we'll take a minute on this slide because this shows the nature of the dam. It extends from down here in the middle up toward the meadow, and it looks as if the meadow were cut out to anchor that end of the dam. Down here in the middle, right in the middle, and okay, in this area, you can see there's quite a large hill of stones pile up here. This is, the land goes generally this way, and then there's a big remains of a dam. This is about 9 feet high, and there are timbers in here holding it. Next. Okay. And here you have another view of it. You can see, look at these 2 long pieces. They're 30 feet long, and there are mortises cut into each of them at the same separation distance. And the feeling is that this would have been turned over up here, so there's a wall of some kind here. These big timbers going across, you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think there's a 5th down here. These are large timbers that butt up against the rock ledge. My feeling is that they were there to brace that building from coming this way. Next. Okay, that's a close-up of that. Next. Next. Okay, back up. Back up 2. Okay, you see these here, if this is say 9, 10 feet here and a lot more here, this means that the mill building was set on the dam. And normally this is where the wheel would be, and out here is where the saw would be. Next. Here's an example. This is from Phippsburg. You can see here's the dam. This end of the building is placed on the dam, and the rest is out in the water. Next. Okay, as I said, from this point up, it's about 9 feet vertically. So this shows you the shape and this construction of the dam. Next. The next thing that happened is we found in 3 or 4 places vertical sheathing. And that vertical sheathing covered an area about this big. And the feeling is that that would have been to keep the water out, except the water that would have come in through the penstock to run the wheel. Next. What we did was we numbered each of the timbers, and then we assigned people to go measure these timbers. Next. The previous, this is the other dam and mill up, the freshwater mill up the hill. You can see the huge amount of cordwood that is set here that have been cut, and then shingles on the left side. Next, a painting of that. This in 1930 was washed out by a freshet. Next. Here are some of those. I'm standing on the ledge looking down. You can see these logs. They come over here. There's nothing else tied to them. They just butt up against the ledge. Next. Okay, here's a group of volunteers. There's Bob hard at work holding the dumb end of a tape. Next. The gal in the white shirt is getting the numbers and running them up to me. I'm sitting safe up on the side of the hill. I can shout, but I can't hear them. That's not because I'm deaf. It's because it was just too darn noisy. Next. Continuing the activity. Next. Okay, I drew this. Here are the timbers going across the guzzle. Here are the timbers making up the dam. This is the area that the vertical sheathing was in. So somewhere with this run of water, you have to have a gate. I don't know where, there is no indication of the gate. So tentatively, I put it in about here, which would be a guess, and we're hoping to have archaeologists come in and help us figure it out. Next. I put those in red. Next. You can see it there. That's the hope. That's the estimate of what's there. And here, can you make that go? Okay. Well, normally that'll go around and around. It'll show you what a horizontal wheel does and looks like. No, okay, next.
It's not gonna do it.
Next. So, next, hopefully, there'll be real archaeology. They will build on what we've done. They will make a good site plan, and that site plan will be able to go to the Bell family, and they can make some plans and work it for their future. Next. And thanks to all of these people. Robin is a dear friend of the family who did the video and a number of the photos. Next.
Because, you know,
That's it. Thank you very, very much. Work in progress, and it's very active.